My name is Eric Skorzinski, and you're listening to episode number 004 of Gut Reactions. Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 004 of Gut Reactions. I want to give a little background on this episode. Last week, we released episode number 003, which was the Would You Rather, the horror edition, and that was a lot of fun to do, but originally that wasn't the plan. Originally, we were going to do an episode entitled The Saw is Family, and it was going to be kind of a appreciation episode for the Texas Chainsaw series, starting with Tobe Hooper's 1974 film, and working all the way through to the 2017 DirecTV movie, Leatherface. And I got about halfway through the episode and really didn't like where it was going and the way it was flowing, and really just kind of pulled the plug on the episode just because I wasn't happy with where it was. Now, fast forward to a few days ago, and man, we had a really big day for horror with the Academy Awards. Full disclosure, I haven't been able to watch the Academy Awards yet. I'm partly putting off watching it because I haven't seen all the nominees, or at least not enough of them to really follow what's happening. And I don't know, there's not a lot of fun watching when you haven't seen a lot of the entries. Obviously, once everything had ended up, the first thing I heard was, we just saw a Texas Chainsaw Massacre clip in the opening, video montage, and oh wow, they just honored George Romero, during the in memoriam section. But Twitter really lit up after the Academy Awards were over because Tobe Hooper was omitted from the Academy Awards memoriam video, and I mean, rightfully so. People were very upset and outraged, and even though I didn't get a chance to watch it, I was kind of bothered by that as well, because it is someone who, regardless of whether you appreciate the horror genre or not, Tobe Hooper was an artist and an amazing filmmaker, and his work really, his mark on cinema with Texas Chainsaw and Poltergeist, and his thumbprint on cinema with Texas Chainsaw 2, Poltergeist, Masters of Horror with Mick Garris, his influence and his contribution to cinema as a whole is something that shouldn't be forgotten, especially not so soon after his tragic passing. With that knowledge, and with kind of the emotions that brought up and the frustration with horror icons being, not being considered among the greats as Steven Spielberg or a Kubrick or, Christopher Nolan, I just felt it was time to, kind of alter a little bit, but revisit the Saw is Family episode. I'm not going to go through all the films, but I want to talk just about what's special to me about Tobe Hooper's two entries, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and really discuss what made those movies special. And, Tobe may have been forgotten during a rewards ceremony, but I echo the hundreds of thousands of horror fans I've seen on Twitter and Facebook that have said, we haven't forgotten. And so this episode, I just want to talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its sequel, and just how Tobe Hooper's movies impacted me as a horror fan. I'll start with Texas Chainsaw. I'm not really gonna play straight through them in a linear way. I'm gonna jump back and forth. I'm gonna reference things in both films. So obviously I'll be talking about some spoilers. If you haven't seen the films, that's crazy you're listening to this podcast. Please stop and listen to them now. But just really, I just want to celebrate because he created two of the greatest horror films ever made, and I think that needs to be recognized, and I think it needs to be talked about. But before we get into Tobe Hooper's two Chainsaw movies, I want to get into what I've been watching in the past couple days. I've actually had some pretty good films I've been able to watch lately. I recently got to rewatch Don't Breathe.
Your lips look sore. That's how you're making your cash out there?
What do you say you and I move away from Mom together? It's a promise.
You're leaving?
Yeah, as soon as I have the money.
When are you coming back?
Never.
Yo, I got our ticket out of here. Rumor is this guy is sitting on at least $300K. Boom!
That's your guy.
Wait, is he blind?
We messed up to rob a blind guy, isn't it?
Just because he's blind don't mean he's insane, bro.
Money's probably in there.
Who's there?
Stay right there.
How many of you are there?
It's just me, man, all right? Just let me go, please. Okay, I swear to God.
That's Fede Alvarez's movie about a group of teens that break into a blind man's house only to have him not be what they expected. I'll just leave it at that. Really well-directed movie. I enjoyed it a little bit more this time than the first time I watched it. Last time I'd seen it was when it came out in theaters. And, man, Fede Alvarez is just an incredible visual storyteller. I don't think Don't Breathe is as good as Evil Dead, but it is a really solid film, and it's really tense and scary. I highly recommend it. I also rewatched a film you may have heard of, John Carpenter's Halloween.
Halloween night. A small American town. 15 years ago. Michael? Halloween.
I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil. I think he'll come back.
Exploring uncharted territory.
Totally charted.
Just talk.
Sure. The only reason she babysits is to have
Halloween.
This is the first time I've seen it in a long time. I didn't remember a lot of the film, and I was, I had about the same reaction I had the first time. I really enjoy Halloween, and for whatever reason, though, Michael Myers has never had the lasting impact that Leatherface, Jason, and Freddy Krueger have had on me. I think, the first time I saw Halloween was the Rob Zombie version, so jumping back to John Carpenter's felt very strange. It is a fantastically made film, some great scary moments, and I do believe it's one of the greatest films ever made. I just, for whatever reason, it doesn't click with me the way some slashers do. I watched Halloween, I watched Little Shop of Horrors, which is the musical directed by Frank Oz.
Now, the most menacing musical comedy ever to paint the silver screen, Dream, Little Shop of Horrors. Where did you get such a weird flair? Thrilled to the romance.
Will you marry me?
Sure. Witness the drama.
You'll be a 10-10. You have a talent for causing things.
I've been saving all month for this. I think I need a root canal. I'm sure I need a long, slow root canal.
Feed me, Clawborn! Feed me now! Savor the spectacle of the first plant in motion picture history ever to sing for its supper. Me now, I'm just a mean green mother from outer space and I'm there. Starring Rick Moranis, Ellen Green, Vincent Gardenia, with a special appearance by Steve Martin, James Belushi, John Candy,
Comfy?
and Bill Murray.
It's your professionalism that I respect.
Little Shop of Horrors.
It's a blast. Seeing Rick Moranis and John Candy and Bill Murray and, Jim Belushi, Steve Martin. It's just a really fun film, and I introduced it to my wife, and she thought it was just great as well. It was really fun. The last movie I watched was Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, which is a 1954 film starring James Stewart, and of course, it's a Hitchcock film, pre-60s, so Grace Kelly as the lead.
Those are just a few of my neighbors. First, I watched them just to kill time, but then I couldn't take my eyes off them, just as you won't be able to.
And you won't be able to take your eyes off the glowing beauty of Grace Kelly, who shares the heart and curiosity of James Stewart in this story of a romance shadowed by the terror of a horrifying secret.
It is a very good, very interesting, tense movie. And, It's something where, because Rear Window has been copied so many times, it was fascinating seeing where Disturbia pulled so much of its content from, where Tom Holland tributes Fright Night to this film. And seeing all that, Rear Window wasn't necessarily surprising in its twists and turns to me, having seen so many copies, but man, it is one of the best single location films. It's one of the best Hitchcock films I've seen, and it seeing how much it's influenced cinema is really fascinating. It was a really good experience. So that's all for movies. I did watch a little bit of a show called Channel Zero. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's on Sci-Fi, and I was watching season 3. It's an anthology show, so season 3 starts a new story, and that's what was available on Roku. And so I started watching season 3 entitled Butcher's Block.
I was wondering if I could talk to you about my sister. I took this job for her. We just needed a fresh start. Didn't even matter where.
Your worst fear is that you're gonna become me, isn't it? And if there's nothing you can do about it.
Where have you been?
I met a man. The air was trembling all around him. It was flies. And they came together all in one voice, and it said, he could fix me.
What did you do to my sister?
In this place, away from craziness and cruelty, I will help you.
Don't you just want to be taken care of?
No pain.
You let me fair.
Don't be afraid.
Very hungry.
You're changing. Embrace it.
It is a really solid show, at least based on the first episode. I'm really enjoying the way it's shot. The performances are a little spotty in places, but it's definitely holds up better than most sci-fi shows. And it genuinely had some really scary, creepy moments in it. And so, based on just watching that pilot episode, I highly recommend giving it a shot. It may be something a lot of horror fans would be interested in. And it never hurts to have an extra horror anthology show. So that's what I was watching. And of course, that leads me to this week's Bloody Good Movie. This week, I'm recommending Devil's Candy.
We've come to the place where we joke about the idea of the devil. But that is Satan's lie to distract us from the reality of who he is.
What's going on?
It's like it flowed through me. I don't remember painting this.
This is Mommy and Daddy's house. They're dead.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry.
I need to come home now.
For we are his pawns. We are his demons on earth. He uses us to carry out his unspeakable deeds. We satiate his hunger.
Your latest work is wonderfully disturbing.
Oh my God.
I didn't mean to do this. To sacrifice.
He will slither into your soul. He is no mask in a Halloween store. He's not what you see in the movies. He is an active, violent, personal reality.
Just the gas?
sweetest candy of them all.
It's a 2015 film. Depending on when you count the release date. It showed up in festivals in 2015 and was released in the U.S. to the mainstream public back in last year in 2017. Devil's Candy is a independent horror film. It stars. It's directed by Sean Byrne. Stars Ethan Embry and Sherry Appleby and Pruitt Taylor Vince, and in an incredible role, Kiara Glasgow, who I think everyone should keep an eye on. She's a fantastic actress. But Devil's Candy is about it's hard to explain. I'll read the synopsis to you. A struggling painter is possessed by satanic forces after he and his young family move into their dream home in rural Texas. That's all you need to know before you watch this movie. It's not a typical cliched haunted house movie. It is so much more than that, and there are layers upon layers of interesting subtext in this film, and I can't recommend it enough to everybody. Anyone that's on Facebook and knows me, or Instagram, knows that I love this movie, and it's something I'm watching often, to the disappointment of my wife, because she does not like this film. But I really love the film. It's fascinating. I believe it's one of the greatest films made, one of the greatest horror films ever made. And I've stood by that. I was worried, when you say something like that, you think, oh, when I, rewatch it, it's not going to hold up. But it does every single time that I watch it. I'll just share my review that I wrote on Letterboxd. And again, this was my first viewing, and nothing's changed. I've seen the film 2-3 times after this. I wrote, "The Devil's Candy is nothing short of a masterpiece. It's perhaps the greatest film of 2017. It probably was. One of the greatest horror thrillers of the 21st century, the greatest indie film of recent memory, and frankly, one of the best directed, best shot, and best acted films of its type ever made. Director Sean Byrne has crafted an intense, atmospheric thriller that grips you from start to finish. The script is incredibly tight, and the delivery by every single one of the cast is perfect, with the most notable standouts being Kiara Glasgow and Ethan Embry, who on a side note also happens to have a role in The Underrated Vacancy, which I'm also a huge fan of. And of course it would be a crime not to mention Pruitt Taylor Vince. He's one of the scariest villains in recent memory, and every scene he was in was filled with a palpable, suffocating tension. Surround all these actors with an incredible metal soundtrack, slick direction, and fast-paced story, and you have the recipe for a horror achievement that must be seen to believed." That's the end of my review, but I'll add, it is a bloody good movie. So check it out. If you want to order it, I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check it out. But now, let's go ahead and grab a can of Dr. Pepper, light up a cigar, and honor the legendary director Tobe Hooper, and more specifically, his landmark horror film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and its sequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
This is the movie that Rex Reed called the most horrifying motion picture I have ever seen. This film is positively ruthless in its attempt to drive you right out of your mind. It accomplishes everything it sets out to do with brilliance and unparalleled terror.
My first impression with Texas Chainsaw Massacre was probably 11th or 12th grade. I had originally watched the Platinum Dunes produced Texas Chainsaw Massacre, starring Jessica Biel, directed by Jonathan Liebesman, and I loved that film. I thought it was terrifying. I thought it was scary. It was gory. It was just incredible. It was beautifully shot. And I went from that to the Texas Chainsaw, and I don't remember the format I saw the original Texas Chainsaw in, but I just remember the quality of the transfer was not very good, to the point where there were certain scenes where it looked like it was just overly shaky. You couldn't make out what certain things were. It was not a good first experience. And actually, come to think of it, I think it was an Anchor Bay release, but it wasn't cleaned up at all. Anyway, I watched the film. I kind of lumped it into the category of Evil Dead, but without the bite. Like, it was that gritty, handheld documentary feel, but it just didn't really have teeth. I know people are thinking, what? And anyway, I watched that, and then I was kind of interested in the series, but not really. And then I heard that Tom Savini had done the makeup effects on Texas Chainsaw 2, and I thought, man, now they're going to deliver the goods. And so I expected the scary, gory film, and I watched Texas Chainsaw 2, and I was super disappointed because I was like, this is just a silly comedy. Like, what is this? It doesn't make any sense. I just didn't get either movie, and I continued to watch the Texas Chainsaw remake and Texas Chainsaw the beginning. I love those. I rewatched them over and over and over again, and it wasn't until this year, or I guess 2017 now, that I rewatched the version that was remastered and put on iTunes. And so I realized watching it, and I just recently rewatched it and noticed even more, is how beautiful the film is. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre really capitalizes on, that Texas landscape and those bright blue skies and these huge landscapes with gorgeous clouds and these very subtle motions that the cinematographer Danny Pearl slipped in and crafted these really gorgeous scenery. He was such a, with Tobe Hooper's direction and Danny Pearl's cinematography, it was just a beautiful, beautiful film. And I think it's great that now we can see it for what it was intended to be. Many have pointed out that the style of it was not intended to be necessarily 100% documentary style. It does have a very specific visual look. There is some of that documentary element there with the slow zooms and things like that. But overall, it's very much a cinematic movie. And then I also revisited, I was so nervous to revisit because I hated it the first time. I revisited Texas Chainsaw 2. I paid for it to watch it hesitantly. And I started the film and I said, is this better than the original?
"13 years ago, audiences across America were horrified by the savagery of a faceless killer. In the wake of this bizarre rampage, he vanished. Now, after more than a decade of silence, he has come out of hiding. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. The Buzz is back. Directed by Tobe Hooper.
I might enjoy it more than the original. Now, I think they're completely different films, so I think to say one's better than the other is purely subjective, but I probably enjoy Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 the most out of all the Texas Chainsaw films. It just works on so many levels. It's got some great performances. I think of Bill Moseley as Chop Top, or Caroline Williams playing Stretch, who I just love her. She's in Hatchet 3 as well. I just think she's so funny. You have Dennis Hopper in probably his best role outside of Land of the Dead. You have Jim Sedow returning as the father. It is just a strange, beautiful film. I love it. It's... what Texas Chainsaw Massacre really did for me was explain what didn't make sense to me of Texas Chainsaw. And I kind of want to take a few seconds to talk about Tobe's use of metaphor and manipulation of story. Tobe was a very interesting storyteller in the sense that he used these very extreme situations, whether they were humorous or scary. A lot of the original Texas Chainsaw is supposed to be comedic. He calls it red humor. It's this very strong humor to the point where it's hardly comes across as humor if you're not looking for it. But he used these extreme moments to tell very complex and very interesting, to make very interesting statements. And it wasn't until I watched Texas Chainsaw 2 where he pushed the envelope, because I think what happened is with Texas Chainsaw 1, the movie was so frightening and so on the surface scary that no one saw all the subtext. And so Texas Chainsaw 2 seems to be an attempt to take all that subtext, bring it to the surface, paint it with this 80s glossy, funny, but still scary kind of sheen, and bring all that to the surface. I never realized this until listening to some podcast. I think maybe it was an interview on the movie Crypt, or maybe it was Shockwaves, but talking about how the article by Carol Clover explaining kind of the tropes of slasher films was released after the original Texas Chainsaw and really dissected the horror film.
You don't know the rules?
Have an aneurysm, why don't you?
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. No. Big no-no! Big no!
I'm a dead man.
Keep him in popcorn. Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. No, the sin factor. It says sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.
You see, you push the laws and you end up dead.
And, you know, it was the article that gave us the term final girl. It was the article that explained, you know, the scary place where things would happen. It described what villains were. It described the use of, or explained the use of phallic objects like chainsaws, machetes, swords, spears that are used by these killers, and the sign of masculinity.
So you're the one everyone's afraid of? Tell me something. What kind of faggot runs around in a Christmas sweater? I mean, come on, get real. You're not even scary. You're not even scary. And let's talk about the butter knives. What is with the butter knives? You trying to compensate for something? Maybe coming up a little short there between the legs, Mr. Kruger? I mean, you got these teensy-weensy little things, and Jason has got this big old thing like...
The idea of a virginal female character, a final girl, who would ultimately turn the table and kill the villain with, you know, a similar phallic object, whether it's a machete in the hands of a final girl in Friday the 13th, or, you know, whether it's a chainsaw or a hatchet or anything like that. And so anyway, so knowing that article was released after Texas Chainsaw, Tobe Hooper really had fun taking all those ideas and just pushing them as far as he could go. And it was because he did that, and because he made it so obvious for people like me, that it painted Texas Chainsaw in a branding light. I could go, oh, that's what he was doing, or, oh, that's what he was trying to say here. You know, obviously in Texas Chainsaw 2, there's the very famous scene where Caroline Williams is Stretch in the radio station, and he's literally holding this ridiculously large chainsaw, and she's commenting in this scene about how large the chainsaw is, and, you know, is he going to use it? And you see him getting excited and doing that Leatherface dance, and he begins chainsawing into this ice and these sodas that are under Caroline Williams' legs, and it's literally spraying up. And I'm not going to explain the metaphor, but obviously, you know, it's a very sexual situation, but it's played for horror and comedy. You know, and obviously when it comes time to kill her, his chainsaw won't start, and he becomes very frustrated and embarrassed.
Are you mad at me? How mad at me are you? You're not really mad at me. How good are you? Huh?
By going that extreme and understanding his tone in that film, when one goes back to the original Texas Chainsaw and you notice things like, you know, Leatherface, you know, with the makeup assuming the feminine role in this all-male patriarchy. When you see at the end when the final girl of the film, Sally, escapes, you know, with little left to be joyful about, and Leatherface is unable to kill her, you see this frustration, and he twirls around flailing his chainsaw in frustration that he wasn't able to finish what he desired to do, which was to kill her. so he's such a... What's interesting rewatching the films by Tobe Hooper is that Leatherface is such an impotent and frightened character. And that's something that carried through even in the sequels. Especially by the time you get to Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, he is completely emasculated. He's always being put under the thumb of this head, father character. And it's very obvious that Leatherface is playing the weak and feminine character in the film. And, whether it be Jim Seedow or whether it be Matthew McConaughey in Next Generation or R. Lee Ermey in the remake, the idea of a strong patriarchal figure in this very traditional Texas household, Leatherface is always going to be the bottom of the totem pole. He's the pawn in the chess game. He's the woman stuck in the kitchen. He is the slave to this family. And, so many things like that. The relationship of the chainsaw being this tool that gives him a voice and a strength. And when the chainsaw is removed, it's a man who's weak and disturbed and abused, is so fascinating. And the amount of depth there that Tobe Hooper instilled in this character is just fascinating. And it's something that doesn't exist for a Jason on the same level. Even Freddy, while I enjoy Freddy's films probably the most of any horror franchise, even Robert Englund's Freddy doesn't have the same amount of depth as Leatherface and that story and that structure. And it's something where even in the worst Texas Chainsaw films, that idea of the family and those strong metaphors, even metaphors about Vietnam or metaphors about the discussions in the first Texas Chainsaw about fate and destiny and, astrology and all those thoughts, they're just wove throughout so strongly by Tobe Hooper. And on the surface, it's just a scary movie. But he does what I think all good horror filmmakers do, whether they're Wes Craven, George Romero. He weaves in something deeper. He also poked a lot of fun. I think one thing that really draws me to Tobe is his playful jabs at things he finds funny. Most obviously, of course, is his jabs at the Texan life and, kind of small country America. And it's very respectful. He obviously, as a Texaner himself, loved Texas. But the way he pokes fun at, kind of this cliched, Texas, with the chili cook-off in the first Texas Chainsaw 2. And
okay, everybody, hush up. Listen up, y'all. The Texas OU chili cook-off champion is from Norman, Oklahoma. No. Waco, Texas. Tulsa. Nope. Austin. He's Dallas's favorite caterer. I think he's kind of cute. The last Roundup Rolling Grill chef, Drayton Sawyer! This year, Drayton, you've got to tell the secret of that fabulously tasty chili.
No secret. It's the meat. Don't skimp on the meat. I got a real good eye for prime meat. Runs in the family. Whoop, whoop. It's one of those hard-shell peppercorns. I gotta say, I love this town. This town loves prime meat.
So there's the big story. Texas clubbers Oklahoma in chili. This is Stretch, your fearless reporter, live from Dallas.
The character of Stretch and, the big tough guy that really doesn't know what he's doing, and Dennis Hopper, who's just got to find the biggest weapon he can because he's going to take things into his own hands. He played so well with humor. Even the first, even outside just at Texas, the way he crafted humor within sequences. And I would argue that some scenes are made scarier because he interjects humor. The scene where Sally in the original film, played by Marilyn Burns, runs into the gas station where Jim Seedow, the patriarchal figure is, and captures Sally and takes her back to the house where Leatherface has destroyed the door in pursuit of these teens. The first thing he says is, "What did you do to the door?" You know.
Look what your brother did to that door!
It's just so funny because in the midst of this kidnapping and assault and, you know, soon to murder and eat this girl, Jim Seedow has this typical fatherly concern of, "You boys messed up the door." And Tobe Hooper interjecting these realistic, you know, relatable moments with these psychopathic killers. It's just, it brings his films to another level. Seeing the grandfather figure, you know, and they're saying he's the best. "Oh, Grandpa, you got this. You can do this." And they're talking about him smashing in this girl's head with a mallet. It's just bizarre. You know, I could go on and on. He just left a mark on horror cinema, and I'm so thankful for Tobe Hooper. I wish I had realized sooner just how powerful his films were. But one thing's for sure, we'll always see his legacy in the films that come out. You know, I think everyone, you know, Eli Roth, Robert Rodriguez, Paco Plaza, James Wan, all these folks that are working and are the modern, you know, masters of horror should tip their hat, and I know most do, to guys like Tobe Hooper, who just crafted not great horror movies, but great movies, and, you know, used the genre to be a vehicle for very important and timely messages about culture, about people, and about the things we fear. I consider this episode my tribute to Tobe Hooper. Lord knows I'll be revisiting his films over and over again and constantly dissecting and enjoying the films he's brought us, and most of all, the Texas Chainsaw series. They're more than just scary movies. They're masterful films. So I just hope everyone will take the time to, you know, whenever you listen to this episode, I hope it inspires you to revisit his films, to enjoy, you know, the cinema of Tobe Hooper once again, or maybe for the first time. So with those final words, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode of the Gut Reactions podcast in memory of Tobe. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Gut Reactions podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, or any other platform by which you heard the podcast. Thank you so much for listening.